Welcome everyone to this new Greytalk. This is a very special one because we're testing our technology, but also that the issue that we are going to address today will be addressed from Mexico. And this is something that touches our lives in many ways, but touches the lives of many people in very difficult ways, some of them positive and some of them quite negative. So without further ado, I will pass the floor to Manuela.
Thank you, Alejandro. Some of us already know Andrea Santiago. She was one of our speakers, our panelists in the Intergenerational Dialogue 2021. We were very, very impressed by her work in defense of the domestic workers. She managed to change not only the policies, but the legislation applicable to domestic workers in Mexico. And therefore, then she wants apparently now to continue her success with another category of unprotected workers, which are in this case the delivery workers. So Andrea is a labor activist and she will explain what is the context, the social and political and legal context of the situation of the delivery workers in Mexico. But of course, we know that the basic features of the social, legal, and political context for that category of informal workers applies all over the world. So we will extrapolate very easily. We have Saúl, that was already introduced. He's the leader of the Ni Un Repartidor Más, who is a group, an association trying to organize the defense of their rights, showing what is the real life of a delivery worker on a daily basis. Andrea, over to you immediately.
Okay, well, thank you. So thank you very much to everyone for being here today, and Manuela and Alejandro for inviting us to this great talk. I am also very happy to share again another space with Saúl Gómez from the collective Ni Un Repartidor Menos. And well, basically in this great talk, we would like to address precarity at work in the digital labor platforms, particularly those involved in the delivery service. So first of all, I would like to give a brief introduction. And well, as you may know, over the past decade, there has been a proliferation of digital labor platforms in several sectors of the economy. These platforms allow many individuals to arrange a ride, to order food, or even to find a freelancer in another part of the world to translate a document, among many other things. So the first thing that I would like to say is that there is a very big diversity of digital labor platforms. But what they do is that they connect businesses and clients to workers, and by doing so, they are transforming all of the labor processes. Today, I would like to focus on the digital labor platforms in the delivery services. First of all, what we have to say is that this type of service is normally carried by one person that normally uses a bicycle, a motorcycle, even wheelchairs. Here in Mexico, we have seen this, or their feet, to deliver mainly food to different clients that use an app. If you have been a user of these types of apps, you may know that it's super easy to to make another. Just by a few clicks on your phone, you can await your order from the comfort of your home or from your office without having to worry about if the weather is terrible, if the traffic is heavy. But delivery workers face a very different reality. Delivery work can imply getting injured, robbed, harassed, among many other things. However, digital labor platforms such as Uber Eats, Rappi, Didi Food, Sin Delantal, that are those platforms that we have here in Mexico City, tend to hide these realities. They highlight, above all, the attractive features of working in these platforms by arguing that they are giving more freedom to the delivery persons, as they do not have to respond to the orders of a boss, that they can supposedly choose their schedule of work with more flexibility, and they have a better income than the average people in Mexico. However, Saúl and I, in this great talk, we would like to address 3 points that let us see that this attractive narrative that digital platforms use can be easily dismantled. And we can prove that actually these modern schemes of work are reproducing precarity at work, but they are also putting workers' life at risk. We are not arguing, and we will not argue, that digital labor platforms should disappear, but we will insist that we need better business models that can put well-being of the workers at the center. But just before going to these 3 points, I just want to give you an idea of the Mexican labor context, because it's very important. In my country, for example, people work really hard and for very long hours. However, only 53% of the population that work is poor by the income they receive. And approximately 17% of them, they do not earn enough to eat well. Also, 60% of the population that work are informal workers, which means that they don't have access to social security. And so precarity at work is very normalized in our country. And this makes it very easy for digital platforms to come and to find workers. And it's and it makes it harder for workers to organize to fight for better working conditions. The lack of good employment opportunities, the job flexibility, and the better pay compared to other available jobs here in Mexico are key motivating factors for many delivery workers. So I was just giving a brief introduction, but I would like now to talk about one of the most basic aspects at work that should be guaranteed, that is security at work. And as you know, in Mexico, as in many other parts of the world, we are getting used to see in every city delivery workers crossing big avenues, alleys, using bridges, going inside an elevator. But as I said before, they use bicycles and motorcycles mainly. But the first characteristic of this type of work is the few obstacles to getting started in this activity. So basically, here in Mexico, you may not know how to drive a motorcycle or a bicycle. You are allowed to deliver without previous training, even when your body is completely exposed in the streets. Also, the delivery person is in charge of buying all of their tools of work, the big backpacks that they carry to put the food inside, their vehicle. If they have to buy their helmet or any other kind of protection device that they consider necessary. But many of the delivery workers cannot afford to buy these protection devices or to give an adequate maintenance to their instruments of work. Mexico is the 7th country in the world that has more road accidents. And that is why the lack of training in this type of work, as well as the lack of basic heat protection, is really risky. And that is why we're seeing an increase of delivery workers' death in Mexico every year. However, security at work involves many other things. And now I would like to ask Saúl what he and his delivery workers colleagues normally face in this sense. So, Saúl, si quieres, pasamos al punto del tema de la seguridad en el trabajo.
Ya que está. Hola a todos, pues antes que todo, muchísimas gracias por este espacio que nos brindan a la comunidad de repartidores de México y agradecerles el tiempo que se toman para poder escuchar pues las vivencias que pasan en el día a día, pero no solamente que las vivo yo, las vive en general todo aquel o aquella que ha decidido trabajar bajo este sistema que es tan precarizado y tan solicitado últimamente. Ser repartidor es saber que vas a salir de casa, pero no tener la certeza de si vas a regresar a ella. En la Ciudad de México, de marzo de 2020 a la fecha, 59 repartidores han muerto. Como repartidores, no hay justicia para nosotros, ¿saben? Enfrentamos la violencia vial todos los días y en una de las ciudades más complicadas del mundo. También estamos expuestos a los asaltos, robos de nuestros vehículos, ya sean bicicletas o motocicletas, extorsiones o agresiones por parte de la policía. Las mujeres que trabajan como repartidoras son mujeres que buscan salir adelante, mujeres que estudian o que trabajan para mantener a sus hijos, pero al menos 7 de cada 10 mujeres que trabajan como repartidoras han sufrido acoso, un acoso que a veces empieza con los propios compañeros repartidores, pero que ocurre también en restaurantes, en los condominios donde pueden ser acosadas por los propios vigilantes o con clientes que salen en calzones o desnudos a recibir un pedido o en el peor de los casos, intentar de meter a las compañeras a sus casas. Tenemos el caso de una compañera que fue secuestrada por uno de sus clientes por 7 días. En una de las zonas más top de la Ciudad de México, como lo es Polanco. Pero lo peor es que muchas compañeras llegan a ser desactivadas de la plataforma porque los clientes reportan que no quisieron entregar el pedido, cuando realmente lo que no quisieron es ser violadas, secuestradas o acosadas. Finalmente, también enfrentamos discriminación. Fíjense qué contradictoria es la vida. Trabajamos en aplicaciones para hacer más fácil la vida de los demás, pero a nosotros nos han tocado que nos hagan más complicada la vida desde el gobierno, autoridades, centros comerciales y pues también algunos clientes. Por ejemplo, hablando de centros comerciales, pues no nos dejan entrar a los centros comerciales a recoger los pedidos porque les damos mala imagen. Y eso sería un principio. Gracias.
Well, as Saúl said, being a delivery person nowadays doesn't guarantee you any kind of security, and your life can be at risk at every time, even more if you're a woman, and also they face all of this discrimination. But what is worse is that as a delivery person in these digital labor platforms, in case of accident, kidnap, assault, you are completely by your own. You will, for example, have to pay out of your pocket the broken leg they got while delivering. However, there is another type of insecurity that workers face in this type of job that has to do with a type of employment that is uncertain and that is also unpredictable. For example, the incomes in this type of work depends on the demand of the clients, of the season, of the number of delivery person that are working that day at the specific points of the city. It depends if you get sick or you have an accident, and also whether you are a good worker from the point of view of the platforms. We here in Mexico have many testimonies of delivery persons that were actually deactivated temporarily by the platforms because they were rejecting some orders. So this narrative that you're free to choose is, of course, a lie. But in this sense, the income is unstable. Many platforms defend themselves by arguing that this is not a traditional type of job, but rather an eventual or temporary job that only help some workers or students to complete their income. However, here in Mexico, there have been many surveys that indicate that work on digital labor platforms is the main source of income for the 80% of the delivery workers. So they depend on their income. So this is probably why also many delivery persons work with a very high intensity and for very long hours. And I think that Saúl can illustrate the main characteristics that make this work really precarious.
Gracias. Bueno, las principales características de este trabajo es que es autoexplotador. Y lo cierto es que no te das cuenta de que te estás castigando por pensar en alcanzar una meta económica. Yo, por ejemplo, llegué a trabajar de forma continua, de viernes a las 5 de la tarde, y regresaba a casa el domingo. Y yo feliz porque había conseguido una meta. Pero en realidad, acababa de trabajar cerca de 48, más de 48 horas seguidas. Pero mi felicidad estaba a tope, ¿no? Es un trabajo carente de derechos. No tenemos ningún piso básico de derechos. No hay nadie que nos facilite o nos apoye en caso de enfermedad crónica, incapacidad, accidentes o COVID. Y quiero hacer esto específico. La única manera que te den algo es solamente si tienes pedido. En la pandemia no había nada ni nadie que nos protegiera. Es un trabajo peligroso. Puedes morir fácilmente. Las empresas se justifican a decir que es un trabajo eventual o complementario para otras personas que tienen un trabajo formal. Pero esto no es cierto. El 80% de los repartidores trabajamos a tiempo completo. Somos además de los trabajadores en México que más impuestos pagamos y que menos derechos tenemos. A nosotros, semanalmente, Hacienda de México nos hace una retención de impuestos semanal. Los pagos no son fijos en el sentido de decir que esta semana vas a ganar, un ejemplo, $100 y la próxima semana vas a ganar $100, ya que dependemos de nuestro propio esfuerzo. Es decir, si yo trabajo 7 días, sé que por 7 días puedo sacar, son ejemplos, $100 en una semana. Y si falto un día, pues bueno, ese es un problema y pues no hay nadie que me asegure mi salario. Como lo digo, dependemos de nuestro propio esfuerzo. No hay tarifas base, no hay salario base, no hay un pago mínimo, no hay distancias mínimas ni máximas, ya que todo se maneja según el algoritmo de las plataformas. El algoritmo hace millonarias a las empresas mientras nos precariza a nosotros como sus socios, usuarios asalariados o colaboradores. Recordemos, no somos sus trabajadores. Y mantiene feliz al gobierno porque nosotros pagamos impuestos. En caso de que no aceptes pedido, las aplicaciones te pueden penalizar como por Ejemplo, la colombiana Rappi, que te puede dejar hasta 2 horas sin recibir un pedido, o bueno, con Uber, que aunque diga que tú puedes rechazar pedidos, si en cierta manera haces muy continuo esto de no aceptar un pedido, pues te pueden dejar de llegar pedidos. Y puedes estar conectado hasta 9 horas, pero eso no te garantiza que vas a recibir pedidos en ese tiempo.
Well, as Saúl already said, in Mexico but also in many parts of the world, one of the biggest problems is that digital labor platforms categorize workers as self-employed or independent contractors by the platforms. This means that they are denying that there is an employment relationship, and therefore they are arguing that they are not responsible at all for guaranteeing workers' basic rights. In Mexico, in particular, this is having a huge impact in workers' lives because they are automatically excluded from having social security, health insurance, disability insurance, or retirement benefits. And with this pandemic, for example, we saw how vulnerable were these workers because of the high chance of infection without having any kind of protection or support. So in this sense, what we are arguing here in Mexico is that we must advance in the regulation of this type of work so that legally we can recognize these workers as workers and not as independent contractors. This issue has not only been analyzed here in Mexico, but also in the international arena, because it has been very difficult to create new categories to regulate this type of work. In Mexico, for example, many scholars or activists have proved that there are signs that this is a subordinate type of employment, which means the recognition of an employment relationship. And some of the evidence to prove this point are the following. For example, the digital labor platforms, they unilaterally determine the terms of service agreements, which must be accepted by workers, clients, and business so that they can access the platform. Also, they determine the payment workers will receive for delivering an order. They choose when to disconnect a delivery worker from work. This has happened a lot here in Mexico. They also own the information that is produced by the platform, information about the worker's profile, the duration of their travels, and all of this information is used to coordinate the platform work. And also the algorithms that the apps and platforms use, they evaluate and rate the platform workers' performance and their behavior. So this, at least here in Mexico, is helping us to prove that there is an employment relationship. But this discussion, as I said, is happening all around the world. We have also examples of successful legal reforms in other countries where workers' rights were recognized. For example, in Spain, with the called Ley Rider that recognizes platform workers as workers, arguing that platforms coordinate, manage, and organize work through their algorithms. After this regulation in Spain, workers now have access to social security, to paid holidays, and have a fixed salary, among other rights. And in England, for example, last year, Uber drivers, not delivery workers, but Uber drivers were entitled to workers' rights. The court basically determined that drivers should receive a minimum wage and also paid holidays. But what is important about this discussion is that if we don't have this regulation, delivery workers are facing a very brutal reality. And I think that what happened in the pandemic is a very good example of what happens when you don't have anything to support you because you're not recognized as a worker. But I would like Saúl to address this point. What was the situation they faced in the pandemic? Also because here in Mexico something interesting happened. They were calling delivery workers heroes. No, they were the heroes of Mexico, but the heroes that were living the worst situation of all without having any support from the platforms and from the government. Saúl, te dejo la palabra para que hables de lo que enfrentaron ustedes en la pandemia y cómo afecta esto de no contar con prestaciones laborales.
Sí. Héroes en la pandemia, apestados o mugrosos en la vieja normalidad. En la pandemia hubo empresas que fueron muy abusivas y que no nos quisieron dar ningún apoyo a pesar de que nosotros seguíamos repartiendo todos los días. Hubo otras que sí nos apoyaron con lo mínimo, como gel antibacterial, cubrebocas o un kit de protección. En algún momento existió un seguro para aquellos que salimos a repartir porque hubo muchos compañeros que se enfermaron. Pero nunca nos avisaron cuándo dejó de existir este seguro. Así, muchos compañeros que se enfermaron quedaron desactivados y sin contar con ningún tipo de ingreso. Quienes sí nos ofrecieron ayuda en la pandemia fueron los restaurantes pequeños, no los de cadenas nacionales o internacionales. Estos pequeños locales nos regalaban agua, comida, nos prestaban un asiento para sentarnos, nos daban gel, te dejaban pasar al baño. El gobierno no nos dio ningún tipo de ayuda. Como el gobierno no nos reconoce como trabajadores, no pudimos entrar en programas sociales ni de apoyo económico. Gracias.
Well, as Saúl said, the situation was very hard. The response of the government was very poor, but they didn't give them any kind of protection or a payment in case they were infected by the pandemic. The platforms were denying any kind of responsibility, so they basically were on the front line without any protection. But in any case, we know that delivery workers are facing many difficulties, but one of the things that is very surprising and that we have seen in the past years in Mexico is the growing organizing capacity that these workers are having to fight for their rights. Actually, I met Saúl five or 4 years ago because I was working in an organization that fights for domestic workers' rights, and they basically wanted us to guide them or to tell them how was that domestic workers managed to change the regulation and to conquer their rights. And that's the way I met him. But they were organizing with other delivery workers. And in the past years, they have gained more visibility in the media. They have done many interviews. They have worked directly with many stakeholders. So this is, I think, a very interesting phenomenon. And one of the things that I think that has been crucial is creating a new narrative that puts workers' rights at the front. And what they have done has been very creative, generating videos and many audiovisual materials that dismantle this very tricky discourse that platforms are using, and that they are denying that workers can talk about their rights. They have also trained hundreds of delivery workers so that they can have a basic knowledge of what their rights are and what they can do to demand them. They have also created collectives, unions, and many other forms of organization to demand the government to prove to make these legal reforms and to guarantee workers' protection. Also, all of the advocacy strategies to make visible that this type of work is really precarious. And they have also done and creative many national and international alliances to demand their rights. And Saúl is one of the most known activists in this sense, and I think he can tell us more about this point about how have they organized to fight for their rights. Entonces, Saúl, te doy la palabra para que nos hables un poquito de cómo ustedes se han organizado en los últimos años como repartidores, cuáles han sido sus demandas, las alianzas que han generado.
El colectivo Ni un Repartidor Menos nace el 27 de noviembre de 2018 por la muerte de nuestro compañero José Manuel Matías Flores. Nunca lo conocí, nunca conviví con él, nunca lo saludé, pero empaticé con la situación o con el sentir de sus familiares en el momento en el que sabes que un ser querido que salió a trabajar ya no va a regresar a casa. A raíz de este suceso, nos empezamos a organizar entre repartidores y a exigir nuestros derechos laborales y a pedir que se nos reconociera como trabajadores y no como socios de las plataformas. Hemos estado presentes en distintas mesas de trabajo con el gobierno local y el gobierno federal. Sin embargo, en las iniciativas de ley que se están creando no vemos reflejada la voz de los repartidores. Y esto nos preocupa, porque regular de forma incorrecta puede llevar a las plataformas a ignorar las leyes o a irse del país. Por eso, desde nuestro colectivo, siempre hemos exigido una mesa tripartita, donde estemos empleados, gobierno y empresas, para poder construir una iniciativa de ley que pueda regular de forma positiva, sin acabar con el modelo de negocio, pero sí garantizar nuestros derechos. Nuestro colectivo ha construido alianzas con distintos grupos, organizaciones de la sociedad civil, con un sindicato que es el Sindicato de Conductores de Vehículos de Servicio, SICONVESE, para visibilizar nuestra exigencia de derechos. Somos parte del Unidos Work Action, un grupo que reúne 56 grupos de repartidores de distintos países. Hasta ahora hemos logrado hacer en conjunto a nivel internacional 5 paros internacionales para visibilizar la precariedad laboral en la que la empresa y gobiernos pues, nos mantienen. El colectivo Ni un Repartidor Menos nace en Ciudad de México, pero se ha extendido a otros estados de la República y también hay capítulos de Ni un Repartidor Menos internacional como Argentina, Chile, Colombia, Perú, del otro lado España y Francia e Italia. Gracias.
Now, let me make a few final remarks. So what is basically our conclusion? First of all, the lives of workers must be put at the center of the regulatory frameworks. This is something that we have to fight for, not only for the digital labor workers, but also for any kind of worker. Second, I think that the technology and the new gig economy cannot be promoted at the expense of workers. This cannot happen. it's horrible that that it continues to happen, and that these platforms are growing exponentially, and that they are getting millionaires, but at the expense of workers. And also, I think that as users of these apps, we have a responsibility, and we can demand better conditions for workers in this type of platforms. I think what has happened in the past years is that this very, like, the velocity and the commodity of ordering something through an app has made us more unconscious about the situation that is happening behind this type of work. And also, I think that the technology is not by itself revolutionary. I think that platforms have also put at the center of their narrative that they are super modern, that technology is transforming people's life, that that technology is having a great impact in workers' life. And I think that this discourse is super tricky and that we have to show that apps and technology will actually revolutionize and make better the world when they will guarantee decent jobs that will allow people not only to survive, but to live well. I mean, that is the kind of transformation that we're expecting. And there is many things that we have to do as users, as activists, as workers. But I think that we're at a moment where the pandemic showed us how everyone is very interconnected. And if we're not, if we do not begin to make conscious all of these precarious type of work, then we're missing a chance of using technology to put people's well-being at the center of any kind of politics, etc. And well, I think that's my conclusion, and I think that we can now have a conversation with you, and I hope that the translation was good, so that Saúl was understood.
A comment, with some very important information shared by Jean-Victor Gruat, who is a former ILO staff member, who wrote the following, and you would like certainly, Andrea, to note it down. It will be very useful for you. Jean-Victor says that the ILO has conducted and is conducting currently a number of studies on social protection and working conditions for platform workers. And of particular interest is the ongoing project financed by the European Union and ILO as implementer on improving China's institutional capacity towards universal social protection. And the special interest of this project is that first, it is ongoing because it will be concluded at the end of this year, 2022. So it is updated. And secondly, it is based, this project, not only on China, but also on other national situations. And number three, the manager of this project is named Mr. Luis Frota. He speaks Spanish and he's very easy to contact. And you can contact him at the email that I will give you in a second, mentioning Jean-Victor Gruat as a reference. And there is also a web page in the ILO website in Chinese and English on this project specifically. Yes, I have a question from Francesca. Based on your experience in changing the legislation in Mexico for domestic workers, what concrete actions are you taking now from a legal point of view to improve the situation of platform workers in Mexico?
So I can address a part of this question, and then I would let I will let Saúl explain other points. So yeah, from the legal point of view, to improve the situation, what we did in the past years, first was to gather and analyze information about the situation of delivery workers here in Mexico. Of course, we know that there is like there are many obstacles right now that we have in the workers regulation here in Mexico, but because we don't have the categories, the right categories that can help us to regulate this kind of work. So right now, lawyers are being really creative, and they are beginning to work with scholars and with activists, and of course with delivery workers as Saúl, or with organization as the one that I worked before, to create an intelligent legislation that can regulate effectively, taking in consideration that this type of work has new characteristics and that we have to take them in consideration, but knowing that we have to put workers' lives at the center of any regulation. So basically what we did was creating alliances with other organizations, with other groups of delivery workers here in Mexico and in other parts of the world, gather all of this information, analyzing this information, creating alliances with some lawyers that have experience in creating legislation, and also having discussions with legislators that are interested in regulating this type of work, but that they actually don't know how to regulate it, because also they don't know with depth about the problems that delivery workers face, and legislators need the information that scholars and activists and delivery workers have in order to regulate effectively. We have also made some campaigns to put delivery workers' condition in the agenda, in the media agenda. We have also created alliances with media communicators. So if you, for example, now Google Ni un repartidor menos or digital platforms in Mexico, you will probably see some videos of Saúl or interviews that have been made that have helped us make visible what they are facing. I think that there is a big resistance of platforms to make any kind of change. I think that the government here in Mexico doesn't have a strategy to tackle these kind of problems. So basically the government is reacting because we have been putting the demands at the center. But I think that we need a more effective strategy from the government. They have to talk with the El Instituto Nacional de la Seguridad Social, like the institution that gives access to social security for workers. They have to talk with the Ministry of Labor. They have to coordinate internally, because this regulation doesn't involve only the regulation of work. There are many other things that are implied in this kind of regulation. But I would stop there, and Saúl, no sé si quieras agregar algo.
Creo que es un poco complicado, hasta un tanto difícil decir qué no podríamos hacer. Acá en México tenemos mucho que hacer con respecto a la regulación de las plataformas. Tristemente, este gobierno quiere meter un nuevo sistema que lo va a representar como un círculo. El gobierno de México quiere meter este círculo en un modelo cuadrado como es el modelo tradicional del trabajo. No va a encajar. Con nosotros en ocasiones se habla de que pueden mejorar las condiciones de trabajo, pero nos quieren convertir en oficinistas de reparto. Acá a los oficinistas se les conoce como godines. Entonces tendríamos solamente el chance de trabajar 8 horas al día, máximo 3 horas de horas extras de trabajo. Y ciertamente, eso es lo que este modelo, en su flexibilidad de autorización, es lo que más atrae a las compañeras y a los compañeros. Trabajar cuando yo quiera, conectarme las horas que yo quiera. Si me sucede algo, me puedo desconectar y puedo atender la emergencia o la situación que yo tenga. Por eso es importante para nosotros hablar o plantear una situación o una regulación entre los 3 actores principales de esto. Lo que somos los trabajadores, el gobierno y las empresas. Tristemente, esto no sucede así. Aquí el gobierno de México lo que más hace es comprar conciencias. Nosotros como colectivo nos hemos opuesto a situaciones donde no vemos representado al repartidor, y lo que ha hecho el gobierno es comprar conciencias a billetazos. Soltar dinero a grupos vulnerables, como lo que somos los repartidores, es lo que más le gusta a este gobierno. Y hablo de que incluso en algún momento a nosotros nos dijeron esta situación, nos ofrecieron esto y nos negamos, porque quizás tenga deudas, pero mi dignidad no tiene precio.
Thank you, Saúl. I have 2 questions from Geshe, from our colleague. The first one concerns what you said regarding security risks. She wonders whether activists like you, when you face a risk, an accident, particularly if it is from an abusive delivery firm, what sort of protection can the judicial system provide to you? And the second question is regarding what you mentioned, that during the pandemic, the smaller firms, the smaller restaurants help the delivery workers as opposed to the big firms. Do these small business form a sort of lobby that could count during your campaigns for a better legislation?
Gracias. Respecto a esto, el sector restaurantero en México está dividido en cámaras. Entonces, voy a hablar de esto que no quería tocar. Pero bueno, yo feliz. En algún momento de la pandemia, el año pasado, la Secretaría de Economía de México y el gobierno de la Ciudad de México, en conjunto con una industria de restauranteros que se llama Canirac, sentaron a las organizaciones a una mesa, y uno se imaginaría, bueno, es el principio de algo bueno para los repartidores. Tristemente no fue así. Esta cámara está muy asociada con el gobierno de México, tanto local o federal, y lo que hicieron fue exigir a las aplicaciones que le bajaran cómo llamarlo así, los costos, las tarifas a sus restaurantes, pero de esa cadena. Y a pregunta de dos opciones hacia la Secretaria de Economía de México, y le dijeron, disculpe, ¿y los repartidores? Y la secretaria de Economía lo dijo claro, aquí no son necesarios. Después, últimamente, hace unas semanas, la secretaria federal del Trabajo de México, pues tiene sus prioridades. Y una de esas prioridades pues, fue reunirse con el CEO mundial de Uber, antes que reunirse con los precarizados que somos nosotros. Este gobierno tiene prioridades y entendemos las prioridades porque incluso nos creó un impuesto el gobierno de la Ciudad de México por el uso de la infraestructura pública. Nos cobra 2% del total impedido porque, bueno, utilizamos la calle para desplazarnos y eso no puede suceder. ¿Cómo? O sea, imagínate usar la infraestructura pública, que toda persona puede utilizar. Pero nosotros como traemos una mochila y tenemos una empresa o algo que nos respalda, según, pues tenemos que pagar un 2%. Y aunque digan y hayan hecho circo, maroma y teatro respecto a que ese impuesto no va a ser transferido, yo solo quiero que ustedes me digan qué empresa es la que está dispuesta a perder. Y eso es lo que ha pasado con nosotros. A nosotros, el gobierno nos ve como la caja chica para programas diferentes, variados, antes que ver como una nueva fuente de trabajo, nuevas maneras de generar negocios. Y eso es el gobierno de México. Y por ejemplo, tenían una muy buena regulación que estaban planeando, que se iba a llamar, o se va a llamar Ley Sheinbaum, que es el apellido de la jefa de gobierno de la Ciudad de México, y la echaron a perder porque empezaron a hacerlo todo en express. Y como lo hemos dicho, todo aquello que no represente a los repartidores, no vamos a permitir que pase porque se pone en riesgo el trabajo de aproximadamente 900,000 personas.
Well, I will address the the question that is in the chat. Yeah, about the small restaurants and cafes that Saúl mentioned. Of course, that they can help us during our campaigns for better legislation. But I think that this, like in the pandemic, we saw that there were different like social schemes of solidarity, like common people were actually seeing what were the consequences of not having any kind of protection. So what we saw was that they were really empathic with delivery workers. And of course, they know what they are facing, and we can also use we can use them for our campaigns. But I think that at this point we haven't designed a communication strategy that has involved them. And regarding the other question, Manuela, I would say that yes, we have a judicial system, but in Mexico, this judicial system doesn't work very well. So of course, like if a delivery worker has an accident, you get the police and an ambulance, of course, but then you don't have the infrastructure to support delivery the delivery workers. Also, we have a very bureaucratic system. So of course, like if you get assaulted, or you can go to the Ministerio Público which is like an instance of the government that can help you process a demand, but it's super slow, and you have to have a lot of time to stay there and to see if something will happen. But Mexico has a great level of impunity. So I would say, yes, of course, there is a judicial system, but I don't think that the judicial system is quite functional. That is why it's so frustrating for many delivery workers that they face accidents, assaults, harassment, but then nothing happens. Like, who is responsible and what is going to happen after you have an accident? You don't have any kind of support. Yeah.
Thank you very much, Andrea. There is a question from Francesca to Saúl particularly. If you used the strike as an instrument of pressure, and if so, what results did you get?
Muchas gracias, Francesca, por la pregunta. Pues mira, nosotros no solamente utilizamos los paros internacionales como medio de presión, no solamente utilizamos los paros internacionales como medio de presión, ¿sabes? Utilizamos también visibilizar las muertes de nuestros compañeros. Hacemos bloqueos en las avenidas principales de Ciudad de México. Nos manifestamos por estas situaciones. Hace unas semanas, 25 policías sometieron a un repartidor, a su esposa y a sus 2 hijas. Obvio que teníamos que salir a protestar. Y fuimos a bloquear la avenida principal de Ciudad de México, el cruce de las 2 avenidas principales de Ciudad de México, Avenida de los Insurgentes y Paseo de la Reforma. ¿Cuál fue la primera respuesta del gobierno? Enviar antimotines. O sea, querían reprimir una manifestación pacífica, los evidenciamos en medios, y obviamente que la respuesta cambió. Nos llaman, y ahora la Secretaría de Seguridad Pública, o la Policía de la Ciudad de México, pues nos tienen otra consideración, ¿no? Estamos empezando a hacer más visible la situación del repartidor como un trabajador precarizado, y también construimos alianzas con esta misma institución. Si un compañero tiene un accidente, nuestra compañera Paola Ángel, que es el enlace, digamos, institucional de ni un repartidor menos con el gobierno, llama al comandante del Escuadrón de Rescate y Urgencias Médicas de Ciudad de México para canalizar una ambulancia al compañero lo más rápido posible, al igual que una patrulla de género. También la violencia la violencia hacia las compañeras no nos es ajena. Hay policía de género. Y lo que tratamos, sí, nos hemos hecho visibles, somos muy incómodos para el gobierno local y federal. Incluso nos sigue la que administra las redes sociales del presidente. Y también muchos funcionarios públicos nos siguen, igual diputados locales y de oposición. Sí, la protesta funciona, porque en algún momento lo hicimos por las buenas, de por favor, ayúdennos, necesitamos dialogar. No quisieron hacernos caso y tuvimos que salir a las calles a hacernos ver, y no nos van a seguir pisoteando. Muchas gracias.
Thank you very much, Saúl and Andrea, for these replies. So I would like to thank you, both of you, to thank you also all the public that we had. As usual, of course, the recording will be available on YouTube, and so the dissemination will go far beyond the persons that we have online now. A special thanks to Jean-Victor Grua for the contact and information. And see you in the next Greytalk. Thank you to all. Alejandro, over to you.
Well, I think everything has been said. Yo creo que todo fue dicho. Muchas gracias, Andrea. Muchas gracias, Saúl. Fue muy interesante. Really, many thanks to Andrea and to Saúl. It was really a very interesting and enlightening. Through hearing them, I realized how difficult their life is beyond what I thought. I had the impression myself that I had just in one package the absence of labor rights for delivery men and women, but it's a really very complex package with many dimensions and many risks, and that has an impact in many lives. And this activity is also linked to the media itself, of the knowledge of the people of the problems, and an issue that we have been discussing in our different Greytalks and different activities is the role of civil society. Estoy hablando de que efectivamente lo que ustedes han compartido con nosotros muestra que hay una complejidad muy grande y que no es solo lo que a veces mencionamos y decimos que los repartidores no tienen acceso a sus derechos laborales, pero cuando escarbas y los repartes, ves que ese no acceso conlleva muchos riesgos y tiene muchas dimensiones. Y también la importancia de la participación de los medios y la importancia de la movilización de la sociedad civil, como ustedes lo están haciendo. Y veo que aquí varios en el chat están mandando felicitaciones a ustedes por su trabajo y los mejores deseos para que tengan éxito. Espero que sigamos en contacto. Como lo dijo Manuela, como lo sugirió Jean-Victor, los pondremos en contacto y estaremos muy pendientes de compartir con ustedes cualquier información que se genere aquí en Ginebra o en el mundo sobre este tema tan importante. Y también como consumidores, creo que vamos a ver todos diferente a la gente que nos trae un reparto cada noche o cada fin de semana que se nos antoja una pizza o un sushi. Hay personas y familias y vidas detrás de eso. Muchas gracias por compartir esto con nosotros. Really many thanks to all of you for participating. And of course, this is the first time we use a robot to translate an intervention. I think we can improve it in the future. But muchas gracias, Andrea. Muchas gracias, Saúl. Thank you very much to everybody. And see you in the next Greytalk. Bye-bye.